Hey everybody, how's it going? So I believe Joey Outlaw asked me to do a ramble for the Minotaurs, a fluff ramble like I did for the Carcharodon, so I figured why not? I enjoyed the Minotaurs chapter, and it's another chapter that's been retconned by Forge World. They took what it was and they turned it into something better, in my opinion, and in this case they kept the name, but they changed the fluff up a bit and changed the color scheme. So first off, let's look at the original color scheme. And in my opinion, this color scheme is just awful. It's just a terrible looking color scheme. And I've seen it painted online from people who have attempted it and painted it, and they do good jobs. It's just not a good scheme in my opinion. And I don't know who at GW thought, hey, let's make this a Space Marine chapter scheme. But they did. And thankfully it's been changed. So that was the old, but now the retconned color scheme for the Minotaurs is this bronzed armor. They're fully bronzed, and they utilize red to denote veteranship. So their veterans will have red, and their Terminators will have red, and all that good stuff. So that's their color scheme. Now, as far as the fluff of this chapter, what they did is they essentially took what was in the fluff and kind of utilized that as a jumping off point for the fluff that they wrote. So it's still a chapter founded during the cursed 21st founding, which is in the 36th millennium. And this was a dark time for Space Marine chapter foundings. A lot of tampering with the GNC went on. A lot of things that would be deemed heretical was going on to try and make the perfect Space Marine chapters. In fact, the whole idea, the whole purpose for the cursed founding was to try to make Primarch-like Space Marines. They're basically trying to make Ascended Space Marines and have a chapter of that. And what they ended up with a lot of cursed chapters, a lot of chapters that went to chaos or were doomed. So that's where the Minotaurs come from. So in the beginning, they were kind of what's the best way to put it? They were kind of an outcast chapter because they fought with reckless abandon. They fought with reckless, savage abandon. They were basically a chapter full of berserkers. They were just really berserk. They wanted to get to grips with their foe no matter what means necessary. Basically, pushing aside any other tactics that would get in the way of them closing the distance and getting into close combat with their foes. So they're very unreliable and unpredictable because they were very independent. So they didn't talk to any of the other Imperial forces in the area, which is not unheard of for some Space Marine chapters to be pretty independent like that. But because they didn't do any recon and they're very unpredictable and unreliable in what they were going to do, they just saw the enemy and they attacked it as best they can with all their fury, and then just as quickly left. So they became to be kind of a thorn in commanders' sides than an asset, because of they could ruin carefully laid plans because they would just jump the gun and just run in with reckless abandon, kind of Leroy Jenkins did a little bit. So somewhere around the 38th millennium, they kind of disappeared from record. Then in the 41st millennium, early 41st millennium, they show up again, and it's a completely kind of evolved Minotaurs force, nothing like they used to be. And it got some people thinking, is this the same chapter that just conquered their curse of being berserkers, or is this a whole new chapter utilizing the same name? Doesn't matter, and we'll never know in terms of figuring that question out. But it's a chapter that kind of strode onto the battle scene again, and with very good backing from high places. Basically, this chapter is funded by the High Lords of Terror, you could say. They always have the best and more material. And I say that because they fight in an attritional style of combat. They do a siege, assault, vanguard style of fighting. And they do it in a very kind of meat grinder type of way, a bit, a kind of an attritional warfare. And what they do, their new tactics now for fighting, is still independent, but not as ridiculously independent as they were. But what they'll do is they'll send in a forward element to engage the enemy and kind of keep the enemy's attention that way. They'll send their faster elements out to basically cut off the escape routes, encircle the foe, and then they'll launch to full might of the chapter against the enemy. Heavy weaponry, heavy armor, and just utterly crush the foe that way with nowhere to run for them. So that's their tactics now, which are tactics I like, but that's their tactics now. And this is all well and good, but the whole reason this chapter kind of has a dark legend and a dark kind of mystique to them, and a bit of brutalness to them is twofold. Firstly, I don't want to say it's reckless abandon, but the chapter is indiscriminate. If there are allies in the area, in terms of civilians, like if there are basically the local populace that's loyal to the Emperor is in and amongst the city that the enemy took over, and they're hiding and huddled in there, they don't care. With their bombardments and their attacks, they're indiscriminate. They'll blow them up if they have to. They don't care. So they'll achieve victory, but it can be at a pretty high cost to the local population. The population they're trying to protect, but they don't care. So there's that. They're also very attritional, like I said, so unlike other chapters, which, pay reverence to their battle brothers and try to ensure victory with minimal to no casualties, the Minotaurs don't care as long as victory is achieved. The fate of their battle brothers, they don't care about. So even that isn't quite enough to get the kind of brutal, dark legend that they have. It seems the purpose of this chapter, they fight against Xenos, just as readily as other chapters do, but they seem to be called in a lot from the highest of commands, the High Lords of Terror specifically in their Senate, to deal with traitor and renegade and rogue Space Marine elements. They're basically anti-Space Marines, and they're very good at it. So that's part of their dark reputation, and to compound that, they have no respect for anybody. If you're not a High Lord of Terra, and if you're not the Emperor of Mankind, of who they're fanatically loyal to, they don't care. They don't like you, essentially. They're not going to respect you and give you proper deference. They're not going to act civil. They're not going to do the proper things that you should do with allies and whatnot. They'll call you out for being an idiot, essentially. They'll do all that stuff. So in that regard, they don't care about any proceedings. Let's say you're there in amongst senior command of a campaign going on. You got several Space Marine ranking officers, and let's say Imperial Guard regiment commander, right? They'll talk down to all three of them, not caring. They don't care. And to go along with that, they like to goad their allies into fighting them. They relish fighting particularly worthy foes, and they view Space Marines as the worthiest. They are Space Marines, so kind of makes sense. So their allied Space Marine chapters they fight alongside, they inevitably try to pick a fight with them. And it can lead to near civil war sometimes between the two Space Marine chapters. And as such, the Ultramarines and their close successor chapters, like Genesis chapter and all that, they all collectively refuse to fight along the Minotaurs now, and just basically hate them. So some bad blood there. But this happens, and this is all well and good, because they have the approval of the High Lords of Terra, basically. Their chapter's history, anything about their chapter information-wise, is all sealed and redacted by the High Lords of Terra, the highest level of authority. So the chapter is very secretive. It's a kind of a dark, secretive, mysterious, legendary chapter now, because information on it is deliberately withheld, suppressed, redacted, covered up, sealed by the highest of authorities, so high that not even the Inquisition can really circumvent it to get information. The Inquisition may make some headway, very little, but ultimately they cannot even overturn the ruling and see the full history of the chapter. So you can say the purpose of the chapter is to basically be the strong arm of the High Lords of Terra, specifically to basically go out and actually deliver their justice directly. They're funded by them, essentially. I mean, it's not literally, but they always have access to the finest war material, and because they fight attritionally, they have no problem about vehicle losses and armor losses and all that. They have a high amount of Terminator armor, enough for their first chapter to be almost fully equipped in it. They have a lot of Mark 8 around power armor, which is the latest and greatest power armor variant. They get a lot of Vindicators and Predators and Land Raiders and heavy weaponry constantly supplied to them, so they'll always have a fresh stock of it. So that's the chapter's purpose, to be this might of the High Lords of Terra in a sense, and specifically seek out and fight any rogue, renegade, or traitor elements of Space Marines. And they relish the opportunity and do it at a drop of a hat. So, in theory, if something happened that the Ultramarines pissed off the High Lords of Terra, the Minotaurs would attack them no problem. Just given the command, they would do it no problem. And that's a first founding illustrious chapter, and they would have no problem going to war against them. And like I said, the Minotaurs are very good at fighting against Space Marine forces. So, it's kind of cool, kind of interesting go at this chapter. And there's a couple other things of note. Firstly, to add to the mystique of the chapter, their master, chapter master, his weapon is the Black Spear, and it's supposedly a weapon from the Custodian Guard armory itself. It's something that the Custodian Guards used to wield, and he gets to wield it. So it's strong, it's got a history to it, it's a legendary type of thing, and it's cool, but it also makes you think, wow, whose pocket are they in, or how much influence that whoever backs them, specifically the High Lords of Terra, have. They got a Custodian Guard weapon. The Custodian Guard are, warriors without peer. The only thing above a Custodian Guard is the Primarch and the Emperor. So the fact that they have some weaponry from those guys is interesting, or at least one weapon at the very least. That's a very cool fluff thing for the chapter master. So going along with that, their gene seed, and this is another thing that adds to the dark legend, and it's not necessarily unique amongst them. Remember, they were part of the Curse founding, but their gene seed is labeled as chimeric, which is a blasphemous thing to have gene seed labeled at, because that means it's not pure gene seed, it's been cobbled together, whether it's genetic material added to the gene seed or different gene seeds spliced together. Whatever it is, it's a chimeric gene seed, and that leads to some theories as well, and I have my own theory, and I'm not going to go on to that here. If anybody wants or is interested in my theory on that, I can do a little theory ramble where I have multiple theories for things in the 40k universe, and I might do that anyway because it sounds kind of fun now that I think about it. But anyways, so there's some theories for that. So whatever happens, their GCD is chimeric, but that's the only thing we know that it's been labeled as such. Other than that, everything's been sealed and redacted. So that leads to the Dark Mystique. And the last thing that I think is really cool, because I really like this concept, is when they go to war or they travel the galaxy, they go as one. They're a fleet-based chapter, but they don't send chapter elements off to different sides of the galaxy. Some chapters will send one company, one sector, two companies halfway across the galaxy, and so on. The Minotaurs go to war as one chapter, completely together. They never separate. So they go to a war zone with their full might, so they're always able to bring their full might to bear on the enemy. So I always thought that was kind of cool. So anyways, that's the Minotaurs chapter fluff. Particularly, I enjoyed this chapter. It's got a dark mystique to it for different reasons than the Carcharodons. And they both kind of had this dark legend to them, but for very different reasons. So anyways, that's the Minotaurs chapter. Thanks for sticking with it. And if people make requests, I can try and do my best to, honor them with the time I have. So don't be afraid to leave a comment saying, hey, what about this chapter? I'll see what I can do about it. Anyways, that's it. So until next time, take it easy. Take it easy.